Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives, and check us out on Instagram. Instagram.com/greatdetectives. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. I do want to encourage you to check out our other podcast, and I'm highlighting the Amazing World of Radio, our summer series, where we are looking at the radio careers and performances of the talented folks who brought the 1966 Batman TV villains to life. We're posting new episodes every Wednesday throughout the summer. You can check it out at amazing.greatdetectives.net, the Amazing World of Radio, wherever you download your podcast from. Well, now it is time for this week's episode of Bulldog Drummond. The original air date, March the 19th, 1945. I will warn you, the audio quality is not the best, but it's still relatively listenable. Here now is Murder Visits Venus.
Out of the night, and into his American adventures comes Bulldog Drummond. About our newest adventure, Bulldog Drummond. Story, Murder Visits Venus. It began one evening about 9 o'clock, while Denny and I were walking along a midtown street celebrated for its cheap amusement places.
Oh, I say, sir, there's the sidewalk telescope. You know, I've always been curious to look through one.
Well, I doubt if you'd see much, Denny. It doesn't appear to be a particularly good instrument.
I beg your pardon, mister. This here's the highest power telescope on the street.
Really?
You said it, mister. This is bargain night.
My word, bargain night.
You said it. Regular price is 2 bits, but tonight you can see Venus in all her rare and glorious beauty for only 10 cents. 1 dime. How about it, Jim?
Dear me, it should certainly be worth 10 cents to look at Venus in all her beauty.
Well, go ahead then and satisfy your curiosity, Denny.
Yes, sir, I will.
I'm sorry, mister. I ain't got change for this $50.
Oh, well, never mind. I'll have a look, too, at your regular prices.
That's a spread, mister.
Oh, dear.
What's the matter, Denny?
The telescope doesn't seem to be focused properly. I tried to adjust it, and now I can't see anything.
Wait, I'll fix it for you. Hey, you shouldn't have turned this way. That's the elevation. How's it now?
Why, I'm looking at the roof of an office building. Oh, great Scott.
What is it?
Something is being raised to the top of the flagpole up there. Captain Drummond, this man has swindled me. This isn't a telescope at all. There must be a device inside which shows a shocking motion picture instead of the star.
You're nuts. Let me fix it then.
Don't touch it, please. I'll look into the telescope.
Go ahead. I don't know what you'll see after this guy monkeyed with it, but this glass is okay.
The man's right, Denny. There's nothing wrong with his telescope.
But, sir, did you see the same thing?
Yes, Denny. A woman in a crinoline dress and a bonnet is hanging by the neck from the flagpole on top of that office building.
dear. First we couldn't get a taxi cab, and now we're here at the office building. We can't get an elevator.
And from the signs, this is the only one that goes to the roof.
And from the indicator, that's where it is now, sir, and where it apparently intends to remain.
Here comes someone who may be able to help us.
A man carrying a time clock. He must be a watchman.
I beg your pardon. Is anything wrong with this elevator?
Yeah, not that I know of. Why?
Oh, he's been ringing the bell for 5 minutes, but the indicator hasn't moved.
Oh, it's that nice elevator kid. He must be up on the roof again, sneaking a smoke. Here, get in this car.
Well, thank you very much.
What floor do you want?
The roof, please.
Have you got business with Mr. Richards?
I'm not sure, but there's a woman hanging from the flagpole on top of this building.
A woman hanging from the flagpole? Say, you kidding?
Not in the least. I'm Captain Drummond. We saw the woman through a sidewalk telescope not 20 minutes ago.
What's more, she was wearing an old-fashioned sunbonnet and a crinoline dress.
Oh, I see. Say, that's it, eh? So that's what? Oh, there's a studio on the roof. The Richards Studio. They take photographs for advertising. There's been a flock of models up there tonight posing for pictures in old Wild West clothes. They're wearing big bonnets and flouncy dresses.
Something explain why one of them could have been hanged on the flagpole.
Oh, must have been a dummy you saw. There's always a lot of kidding goes on to take pictures at night. Yeah, this is as far as this car goes. 29th floor. The roof is another flag up.
I see. Well, where's the stairway?
Yeah, I'll show you. Come along. No, I'm kind of curious about this thing myself.
My word, I should think you would be.
Elevator boy is probably up here watching whatever's going on.
Well, there's his car with the door open. It's empty.
Yeah, kid needs a lesson. You don't know what it means to stay on a job. Say, this is funny. The door leading out on the roof is bolted on the inside. There can't be anybody out there except the ones who went through the offices.
Well, I'd suggest you open the door so we can see who is there.
Yeah, sure.
My word, there's not a soul out here on the roof.
No, Denny. And there's nothing hanging from the flagpole either.
Oh, dear. Do you suppose we could have both been seeing things, sir?
We saw exactly what we thought we saw, Denny. But at the moment, I'm interested in what we don't see.
You mean the woman, sir?
No. I mean, where is the elevator boy?
Please, sir, we've searched this roof thoroughly, and there's no trace of either the woman or the elevator boy.
Well, I beg your pardon, Denny. There's one slight trace. This partially smoked cigarette that was lying just outside the door to the roof.
No lipstick on it. Couldn't have been smoked by a woman.
You noticed that too, do you, Denny?
If you ask me, there never was any woman out here.
But as Captain Drummond asked, where is the elevator boy?
Oh, he's probably in one of the photograph studios, neglecting his work as usual. I'm going to teach that kid a lesson.
What kind of lesson?
The control switches for the elevators are up here in the machinery chamber, just inside the door to the roof. I'm going to shut off the power on the car we come up in, and we'll take the kid's car down.
My word, is that rather mean to make him walk down 30 flights of stairs?
I said I was going to teach him. I'll lock the door to the switch chamber when I get through so he can't turn the power back on. He'll have to walk down to get the keys.
Is that the door to the switch chamber?
Yeah. You two get in the car. I'll be with you in a minute.
Very well. Well, Denny, we won't keep the watchman waiting long, but I think we should ask some questions inside the photographic studio.
Yes, sir. The watchman said the place was run by a Mr. Richards.
Hey, come here quick.
Come along, Denny.
Yes, sir.
Look, I opened the door to the switches, and look, there he is.
Oh, dear. The elevator boy.
Yeah, must have fainted or something and fallen into the machinery off the roof elevator.
No. He was murdered.
He's dead?
Yes. And he was killed before his body was put in here. If that elevator had been started, the marks of murder would have been destroyed.
Our story continues in just a moment. And now, back to Bulldog Drummond and the story he calls Murder Visits Venus. Through a sidewalk telescope, Drummond and Denny see a woman hang to a flagpole on the roof of an office building. When they reach the scene, they find the body of a murdered elevator boy.
Well, Watchman, I'm positive now that a woman was hanged on the roof of this building.
Then how come we find the boy's body but no woman?
I believe I can reconstruct the murder of the elevator boy. Here's the cigarette butt I picked up out on the roof.
Oh, I understand, sir. Apparently the boy came up on the roof for a smoke and caught the woman's murderer in the act.
I think so, Denny. Notice the cigarette wasn't put out. It stopped burning by itself when less than half consumed.
And what do you make of that?
The boy must have lighted the cigarette in the elevator coming up. He stepped out on the roof, and the woman's murderer strangled him.
And the cigarette fell to the roof.
Exactly.
That's fancy guesswork, but where's the woman's body?
I'm not sure. When you brought us up, you told us that some models were here tonight, posing for photographs.
Sure, for the Richard Studios.
You said the models were attired in old Wild West costumes.
Yes, that's right.
How did you know what they were wearing?
Well, I saw a bunch of them come out the elevator down the lobby.
In their costumes? How odd.
Oh, they was only going to the restaurant in the building for a bite to eat. I heard one of them say they had half an hour before they went back for some more pictures.
And how long ago was that?
Oh, about half an hour. Say, I just happened to think of something.
Well, better late than never.
One guy in a cowboy suit come down after the others. He had on one of those handlebar mustaches. It looked phony to me.
And how did you happen to notice him?
Oh, 'cause he kept ringing for an elevator from the 29th floor, so I went up and got him.
And that's when you first decided that the elevator boy was up on the roof having a smoke.
Yeah, I thought this guy couldn't find him, so he walked down the flight and rung for another elevator.
Yes. Well, thanks for the information. Now, I'd suggest that you get back to your elevator. The models will be returning from their supper any moment.
See, that's right.
Notice especially if the cowboy with the false mustache is among them.
Sure is. Oh, but look, I've got to get on the phone and tell the cops about this murder.
Denny and I'll attend to that. Bring the models up here, please, and don't tell them what's happened.
Why not?
I'd prefer to watch their reactions when I tell them. Come along, Denny. We're going to talk to Mr. Richards. I understand, Mr. Richards, that you have a group of models here tonight posing for photographs.
That's right, Captain Drummond. The job is a rush order, so we're working overtime. Would you mind telling me why you're interested?
Why, we looked through a telescope and...
Please, Denny, please.
Very well, sir. But that's how it happened.
Sounds most amusing.
No, Mr. Richards. Murder is never amusing.
Murder?
Yes. There was at least one murder committed tonight on the roof just outside. And I believe there were two.
Good heavens. Who was killed?
The night elevator boy, for one.
Freddie? Who did it?
I'm not positive. That's why I wish you wouldn't mention murder to anyone until I've talked with a certain suspect.
Who's that?
A man wearing a cowboy costume and a false mustache.
All the men are wearing cowboy clothes. At least two of them have false mustaches.
This one was the polar bear type. The mustache, I mean, the walrus type, Denny. Thank you, sir. I'm still referring to the mustache, not the man.
As I recall, John Andrews was using a big false mustache.
I'd like to talk to him then, please.
Of course. They should all be back in the studio by this time. Let me look in there.
They're back, sir.
John Andrews. Yes, sir. Come in right over. Come in.
You want to see me, Mr. Richards?
John, this is Captain Drummond. I want to ask you some questions.
Questions? What about? About a false mustache, Mr. Andrews.
Oh, that's the thing. I've got it right here in a pocket. Do you want to see how I look with it on?
Well, there's someone who does. Denny, will you bring in the watchman?
Yes, director.
Mr. Why aren't you wearing the mustache?
Why should I, except in front of the camera? I just got back from supper, and you can't eat to a strainer like that.
Well, suppose you put it on now.
Why, sure, if Mr. Richards says so.
Go ahead, John. There's the wall man.
Thanks.
Here's the watchman's,
There it is. Look me over.
Yes, watchman. Look him over. Is he the man?
Well, the mustache looks the same, and he's about the same build. I thought his face was thinner, but he was standing back of me all the way down.
All the way down? Say, what is this?
I'd like to know if you took an elevator down to the lobby about half an hour ago from the 29th floor instead of the 30th.
No, I didn't. The whole gang of us went down from this floor.
Captain Drummond, I don't think this is fair to John. An elevator boy was murdered, John. You're apparently under suspicion.
I am. Why?
I don't know. Captain Drummond seems to be impressed by the watchman's story that he took you downstairs from the 29th floor.
The watchman's story? Now, look here. I didn't even know the elevator boy, but the watchman did.
Huh?
Perhaps he invented his story to cover himself.
You phony painted up sissy, you.
What?
I'll teach
Well, you
you.
now tell me like that,
Listen
please.
here, that fancy-looking shrimp ain't gonna accuse me of no murder.
No one is
I don't
accusing anyone at the moment.
Well,
But I believe another murder was committed here tonight.
Yes, a woman dressed in a crinoline and a bonnet.
Wait, Scott. Now, Thelma.
Thelma, who's she?
Thelma Lawson, one of the most beautiful models in this business. She happens to be a protege of mine.
Don't tell me Venus is dead.
Venus?
Well, that's her nickname.
Oh, dear. I try to look at Venus through a telescope and I see her hanging from a flagpole.
Tell me something, John. There were 4 girls dressed in crinolines and bonnets. What made you think it was Thelma who was murdered?
Oh, she didn't go down to eat with the rest of us, and she wasn't here when we got back.
You hate her, don't you?
You know I do, and you know why. I'd like to see her dead. But I didn't kill her.
Denny,
Yes, sir?
telephone the police. I'll make sure that nobody leaves the premises.
All right. Now relax, everybody. None of you are under arrest. But you're all to stay in the studio. There's an officer posted at every door. Now then, Drummond, where can you and I talk in private?
In Mr. Richards' office, Inspector Maxson, through this door.
Good. Let's go in.
I've asked a few questions since Denny phoned you. John Andrews had a motive for killing Thelma Lawson.
Well, it's too bad about her. If she is dead. Venus, they called her.
And from her photographs, they weren't exaggerating. But, you see, she was responsible for Andrews losing a substantial motion picture contract. She persuaded the picture company officials to engage a friend of hers instead.
And I suppose Andrews has hated her ever since. Well, that's a motive for murder, but we still aren't sure that she's dead.
Denny is trying to find evidence that she is. I expect to hear from him very soon.
You've got an idea where her body is?
The body, or its remains. Frankly, I don't believe that Andrews is guilty. The other models say that he rode down in the elevator with them, ate supper, came back.
Well, then, what about the watchman's statement?
He didn't definitely identify Andrews as the man with the mustache. The man he took down was undoubtedly the murderer, but I don't think it was Andrews. Come in, Denny. You've brought the watchman with you, I see.
Yes, sir. And some other things.
here's what we found in the ashes downstairs.
Yes, gruesome stuff. Charred bones and some jewelry. I have something else here in my pocket, a most distinctive ring. One of the models identified it as a ring that Miss Lawson always wore.
Where did you find these things?
In the incinerator of the restaurant in the basement, Inspector.
I came to the conclusion that there was only one way the girl's body could have been disposed of so quickly from the roof. It must have been dropped down the vent of the restaurant incinerator.
Why didn't the murderer dispose of the elevator boy's body the same way?
Because it would look more natural if his body were found. Once the elevator to the roof had started, it would have erased all evidence of murder. It would have looked as though the boy had been adjusting the controls and had fallen into the machinery.
Pardon me, sir. There's some other items here in the remains from the incinerator.
Yes, Denny, I noticed them. Brass studs, apparently from a cowboy belt.
That proves I was right. The guy in the cowboy outfit with the big mustache rode down with me in the elevator. Then he must have gone down into the basement and thrown the cowboy suit into the incinerator.
Well, that exonerates Andrews because he rode back up in the elevator wearing a cowboy costume.
So, now we haven't got a suspect.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Inspector. I'm sure we have. Denny, did you inspect the freight elevator?
Yes, I did, as you asked me to, sir. The car is at the 29th floor when it should be in the basement.
Then that's the way the murderer got back up here. Mr. Richards told me that only 2 people stayed here when the models went down for supper.
2 people. Himself, I suppose. And who else?
The head photographer, Bob Wilson. Supposedly, he spent that time in the dark room developing the pictures he'd taken. Denny, let's have Mr. Richards, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Richards, Captain Drummond would like to speak with you.
Yes, of course. What is it, Drummond? Mr. Richards, your head photographer, Bob Wilson, is about the same size as Mr. Andrews, is he not?
I'm sorry to admit it, but he is.
But if Bob Wilson wore a cowboy costume over his clothes, he would appear considerably larger. On the other hand, Mr. Richards, you would be about the same size as Andrews, and you couldn't conceal your thin face.
What are you insinuating?
Nothing, Mr. Richards. You murdered Thelma Lawson. You hanged her from the flagpole.
Are you crazy?
No, and I hope you're not. No one but you could have killed the girl. You murdered the elevator boy, too. And then you put on that cowboy costume and the mustache and rode down in the elevator.
That's very interesting.
You hoped to throw suspicion on John Andrews, who had a possible motive for murdering Miss Lawson. There's just one question I'd like to have you answer.
I'll answer nothing.
Why did you hang the girl on the flagpole when it would have been so much easier to strangle her?
This is outrageous. Hold it, Richards. You're going to headquarters with me. You're under arrest. The charge is suspicion of murder.
I'm sorry I haven't been in touch with you, Inspector. Denny and I have been doing a bit of research.
Did you dig up anything, Drummond?
Yes, I think we did.
Well, let's hear it. We've done our usual job. We turned Richards' office and his apartment inside out. We found hundreds of fingerprints, which don't mean a thing.
And you checked all of Richard's associates, I suppose?
Naturally, Denny. We've had our men watching a dozen of them for the past 24 hours. But none of the reports will give us a motive for Richards to murder Venus.
Well, his motive, of course, is the real evidence we need.
Sure, but everything we've dug up points away from a motive. Now, here's what we found. In 1929, Thelma Lawson's grandfather went broke.
Yes, that's Jacob Lawson. He took Thelma when her father and mother were killed in an automobile accident.
That's right. And in 29, Thelma was 7 years old. That's when Richards discovered her as a child model. He helped her get jobs. He took her under his wing and promoted her. As a matter of fact, he was her agent, taking 10% of everything she earned.
I beg your pardon, Inspector. Captain Drummond knows all that.
Yes, well, Richards built Thelma up. She was the highest paid model in the business when she died. And she was paying him 10% of what she got. So, why should he kill her?
For one reason.
Well, if you found the motive, I wish you'd let me hear it.
I told you that we'd done some research. Now, here's a photostatic copy of an old newspaper. It's called the Mesa Range Outlook. It was published once a week in Arizona.
Notice the date, Inspector. 1895. 50 years ago.
Yes, Denny.
The story I've marked is an account of the hanging of a man named Peter Smith. He was supposed to have killed a man in the cattle war which was raging in that territory.
Well, I don't get the connection with this murder case.
Well, you will when you study this newspaper story. Smith was convicted of murder on the testimony of his partner, a man named Jake Lawson. But Smith's wife testified that Lawson committed perjury to save himself.
Jake Lawson? Well, that's the name of Thelma's grandfather, Jacob Lawson.
Precisely. And Peter Smith changed his name to Peter Richards. He was Peter Smith, son of the man that Jacob Lawson hanged 50 years ago.
Are you sure of this?
We've checked every fact. It occurred to me right at the start of the case that hanging Thelma from the flagpole was some sort of gesture on the part of her murderer, especially in a costume of the old Wild West.
I thought it a trifle gaudy myself, sir.
You say it was a gesture, Drummond?
A symbol, if you like. The trademark of an old feud. I'm positive that Richards arranged to hang Thelma Lawson in just that way to avenge his father.
From your evidence, Drummond, I'm convinced. You're right. Richards must be the murderer. And we've got a case that'll stand up in court. I'll have Richards rearrested.
Rearrested? My word, we thought you had him in jail.
I did, as long as I could. We held him exactly 24 hours. He was released 20 minutes before you came in.
Then he's well ahead of us. Inspector, we need a police car. We've got to reach old Jacob Lawson before Richards kills him, too.
What do you want with me? Why do you wake me up in the middle of the night?
Be quiet, Jake Lawson.
There's nothing here for you to steal. I haven't had any money for years.
I'm not looking for money.
Then what do you want?
Your life. You could have taken it years ago. But I wanted to make you suffer.
I don't understand.
My real name is Peter Smith. I'm the son of the man who was hanged 50 years ago on your perjured testimony.
Peter Smith?
My mother swore vengeance against you. She told me so when she was dying. That's why I'm here.
You're Peter Smith?
Yes. I learned a long time ago that you worshipped your granddaughter. Thelma Lawson, her name was. I found her when she was a child.
Why, you're Mr. Richards.
Now you understand. I taught your granddaughter to be the most famous mother of the day. And last night, I hanged her. Just as you had my father hanged.
It was him or me?
Well, Lawson, this time it's you. I planned to make you suffer for a long time. Captain Drummond butted in. Sooner or later, he'll find me out.
I hope it's soon.
Won't be soon enough to stop me from killing you.
Get away from me.
I haven't time to hang you. A bullet will have
Oh, nice work, sir. You shot the gun out of his hand.
I've got him, Drummond.
I say, I believe the old man has fainted.
No, Denny. He's dead. The shock was too much for his heart. Well, he's finally paid for his crime.
And Richards will pay for both of his.
The one I feel sorry for is Thelma Lawson. She knew nothing of her grandfather's guilt.
Poor girl. From her pictures, she was such a beauty. I can understand why they called her Venus, although I never saw her. I say, sir, I just thought of something.
What's that, Denny?
I never saw the planet Venus either.
And now, here's Bulldog Drummond to tell us about this week's stories.
In a rundown manor outside a small southern town, the body of an old woman disappears from her deathbed. A moment later, her son dies, apparently from heart failure, and his body also vanishes. A medicine bottle, a hypodermic needle, and a mosquito bite are clues which point to murder. I call the story The Mystery of the Natural Death. Be sure to listen, won't you?
And so into the night walks Bulldog Drummond, seeking new adventure and excitement. The next adventure with Bulldog Drummond will be heard over most of these same stations next week at the same time.
Welcome back. I love the setup for the murder. It just did a great way of catching the listener and just drawing you right into the story right away. One thing I do wonder about is if Bulldog Drummond is famous and your average person on the street knows who Captain Drummond is, or some people might tend to think he's with the police. I mean, if you say, I'm Captain Drummond and I'm investigating whether someone was murdered, people would just assume. I'd be shocked when he said he was going to call the police. Well, what makes you think I'm with the police? I'm a retired British Army captain from World War I who just happens to be investigating a murder. That's why I introduced myself as Captain Drummond. This whole thing going back to the Old West was not something that I expected. I thought that her wearing the crinoline dress was kind of incidental. You know, she was murdered while modeling the clothes. But it turns out it was actually quite intentional and somebody playing the long game for 50 years. And as far-fetched as that might seem in general, they do make it work here logically. And this type of solution isn't necessarily uncommon in detective fiction of the era. There was a Nero Wolfe mystery, kind of one of the underrated ones from the late 1930s that also had an Old West solution, and even a Sam Spade episode from 1951 we played a few months back. That one also went back to the Old West. I think it was such an iconic era in history that really loomed large that many writers were willing to write plots that evoked it in their solutions. More often than you might say a solution of a mystery today coming down to, well, this all goes back to 1974. Also, some top-notch research skills from Drummond and Denny in being able to get this solved in terms of figuring out what the motive might have been in just over or just around 24 hours. Keep in mind that this is back in 1945. You had the war going on and you had just the limits of technology at the time and the ability to research it. Plus, they were in New York, and this happened out west. So overall, I'm impressed and really enjoyed this story. Well, now we turn to listener comments and feedback. And we start out with an email from Russ who writes, Hey Adam, I've recently started listening to Bulldog Drummond, and it reminded me of when I was performing in Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. The character Speed mentions Bulldog Drummond during the poker game as an insult to Denny, one of the other players. At the time, I had no idea who Bulldog Drummond was, so the name went right over my head. It wasn't until you started playing episodes on your Great Detectives of Old Time Radio podcast that I was able to put two and two together. Now that I'm listening to Bulldog Drummond on a weekly basis, I find myself feeling a little jealous at how he's able to get himself out of sticky situations using quick wit and charm. I thought most of the old-time radio detectives have done that to one degree or another, but for some reason he stands out above the rest. If I knew who Bulldog Drummond was, I'd have listened to him a long time ago. Thank you for releasing the series. Well, thank you so much, Russ. Appreciate the comment, and I'm glad you're enjoying Bulldog Drummond. Definitely one of those characters that enjoyed some popularity in the first half of the 20th century and has kind of been forgotten. And the radio version, I think more than most, it's definitely been one that I think was neglected, and I've talked about our struggles in trying to make sense of this series and how it's supposed to play out. But I appreciate that you're enjoying it and that it's been worth that effort. Also, The Odd Couple, I've seen the movie and I don't remember hearing that line in the film, although I've only watched it once. Maybe I've missed it. But I wonder if that's one that was in the stage show but not in the movie. All right, well, then I've got a comment from M. Gill on our listener survey. And M writes, my goal was to follow every podcast you've done, from Superman to the individual detectives to the latest Snack Wagon. I was astonished at how much work it must have taken to accomplish all that. I look forward to seeing what next. I hope it will include adding comedy. No one does a better job than you with old-time radio. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your comments. We have done some comedy as part of the amazing world of radio. Last year, we did the complete series of Mr. and Mrs. Blandings, a sitcom that starred Cary Grant, and we went through all the circulating episodes of that series. And we've had other scattered comedy episodes in the amazing world of radio, and we'll actually have some as part of the Batman series. I think this week's is kind of like a little bit of comedy romance. But I've toyed with a few comedy ideas for podcasts over the years. I've thought that I would love to do a podcast where we covered all of Jimmy Durante's old-time radio shows and all old-time radio guest appearances, and call it the Snozcast. But these sort of decisions come down to the questions of what are people going to be interested in, and also what I have time to do. When it comes to the Snozcast, I think I like Jimmy Durante a lot more than most people, so that could make things a challenge. And then, of course, time is always an issue. But I do have at least one good idea that could become a comedy-based old-time radio podcast, and we'll see how that develops. But once again, thank you for your kind words and taking time to fill out our survey. And I also want to go ahead, Alexis, for giving a 5-star rating to the case of the Axis submarine on Good Pods. Now it's time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day, and I want to go ahead and thank Carrie. Carrie's been one of our Patreon supporters since November 2018. Currently supporting the podcast at the Detective Sergeant level of $7.14 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, Carrie, and that will actually do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software, and be sure to rate and review the podcast wherever you download it from. We will be back next Tuesday with another episode of Bulldog Drummond. Next Wednesday, we'll be introducing Broadway's My Beat. But join us back here tomorrow for our final episode of Dangerous Assignment, where...
Steve, I'm glad you called. Our little friend's turned out to be a practical joker, Milton.
You're telling me?
Huh?
Yeah, the briefcase he handed me.
What about it?
No bomb. It was stuffed with newspapers.
Newspapers?
Yeah. You get to 37 Rue Dauphin?
It's an empty lot.
What? Hey, what's going on?
That's what I'd like to know. Hey, any word from the man the police have at the cafe watching our little friend?
No, he hasn't called in yet.
Probably still over there. I think I'll go on over.
That will not be necessary, my friend.
What?
You will hang up the phone, please.
Hey, Steve, what's the matter? Steve.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/greatdetectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.